England, a small island on the edge of Europe, yet for centuries it ruled half the world. From the first footprints left in ancient mud nearly 1,000,000 years ago, to the nuclear age, the Beatles, and Brexit, this island has never stopped shaping history. Wars that changed the world were fought here. Empires were born and buried here. Languages, laws, and revolutions that still govern your life today, they all started here. In the next 30 minutes, we're going to cover it all. Every invasion, every king, every turning point, the unfiltered history of England. From the very beginning to the present day, you're watching Axis Narrative, a channel dedicated to history. If you enjoy this kind of content, subscribe and hit the like button. It genuinely helps the channel grow and reach more people who love history. The story of England begins not with kings or castles, but with footprints. In 2013, archaeologists discovered fossilised human footprints at Happisburgh, Norfolk, nearly 900,000 years old. The oldest known human footprints outside of Africa. We don't know their names, their language, or their gods, but they walked this land, and that is where our story begins. For thousands of years, Britain was not even an island. It was connected to mainland Europe by a land bridge, Doggerland. Around 6,500 BC, rising seas after the last ice age swallowed that bridge forever. Britain became an island, and its destiny changed with it. By 3000 BC, Neolithic people were constructing one of history's greatest mysteries on Salisbury Plain, Stonehenge. The largest stones weigh up to 25 tons, transported from Wales, over 200 miles away. Aligned with the summer solstice, it served as a ritual and astronomical site of enormous cultural significance. After 5,000 years of study, its full purpose remains debated. Then came the Celts, Iron Age tribes from Central Europe, settling across Britain from around 800 BC, fierce and independent, the Iceni in the east, the Brigantes in the north, the Trinovantes in the south. They built hill forts, forged iron weapons, and were governed by a priestly class known as the Druids. These were the people the Romans were about to meet, and the Romans were not coming in peace. In 43 AD, Emperor Claudius launched the Roman invasion with 4 legions, approximately 40,000 soldiers. Caesar had raided Britain in 55 and 54 BC, but Claudius wanted a permanent province. Within 4 years, most Celtic tribes were subdued, but resistance was fierce. In 60 AD, Queen Boudica of the Iceni, whose lands had been seized and whose daughters abused by Roman officials, raised an army of over 100,000 warriors. She burned Londinium, Camulodunum, and Verulamium to the ground. Roman sources estimated 70,000 killed. She came terrifyingly close to driving Rome off the island. Ultimately defeated in battle, she took poison rather than be captured. Rome stayed for another 350 years and transformed Britain completely. Over 10,000 miles of roads were built, many following routes used by modern English roads today. Londinium became a thriving capital. Romans introduced Latin, concrete, underfloor heating, and a sophisticated legal system. In 122 AD, Emperor Hadrian ordered a wall built across the entire northern width of Britain, 73 miles from coast to coast. More than a barrier, it was a statement. This is the edge of civilization. In 410 AD, the collapsing empire sent Britain a devastating message. Defend yourselves. The legions were gone, and into that vacuum something new was coming. With Rome gone, local warlords seized power and infrastructure crumbled. From across the North Sea came new peoples, the Angles, Saxons and Jutes, Germanic tribes from modern Denmark and Germany. Arriving from around 449 AD, they pushed the native Britons westward into Wales and Cornwall. It's from the Angles that we get the name England, Engla land. The newcomers organised into competing kingdoms, the Heptarchy, Northumbria, Mercia, East Anglia, Essex, Kent, Sussex and Wessex. These kingdoms fought constantly for dominance. The real historical inspiration behind Game of Thrones. In 597 AD, the monk Augustin arrived from Rome, converted King Ethelbert of Kent, and established the first Archbishop of Canterbury, a position that still exists 1,400 years later. Monasteries became centres of learning and art. The Lindisfarne Gospels, created around 715 AD, remain among the most beautiful books ever made. Then, on the 8th of June, 793 AD, everything changed. The monastery of Lindisfarne, that sacred island of scholarship off the Northumbrian coast, was attacked without warning by Scandinavian raiders. The monks were killed, the treasures looted. The scholar Alcuin of York wrote in horror, "Never before has such terror appeared in Britain." The Viking Age had begun. For 2 centuries, Norse raiders targeted Britain's coastline, but they were not merely raiders, they were settlers, traders, and eventually conquerors. In 865 AD, the Great Heathen Army landed with the intention of permanent conquest. Kingdom after kingdom fell. By 878 AD, only Wessex remained, and its king, Alfred, was hiding in a swamp. Alfred regrouped, rallied his men, and in May 878 AD, at the Battle of Edington, he decisively defeated the Danish king Guthrum. In the peace treaty that followed, England was divided. The Danes controlled the north and east, the Danelaw, Alfred the south and west. But Alfred was more than a warrior. He built fortified towns, reorganised the army, created one of England's first navies, and translated Latin texts into Old English. His grandson Aethelstan completed the work. In 927 AD, he became the first king of all England. The Viking story had one final chapter. In 1013 AD, Danish king Svein Forkbeard conquered all of England. His son, Snut, ruled England, Denmark and Norway simultaneously. The famous story of Knut commanding the tide, told not as arrogance, but as a lesson in humility, belongs to this era. By 1042 the English line was restored, but King Edward the Confessor died childless in January 1066, and the question of succession was about to trigger the most consequential invasion in English history. January 1066. King Edward the Confessor is dead. No heir. 3 men immediately claim the throne of England. Harold Godwinson, the most powerful earl in England, crowned the same day Edward was buried. Harold Hardrada, King of Norway, who believed the throne his by treaty. And William, Duke of Normandy, who claimed Edward had personally promised him the crown. Within 9 months, all 3 would fight for England. Only one would survive. Harold dealt with Hardrada first. In September 1066, he marched his army 185 miles in 4 days, one of the fastest military marches in medieval history, and annihilated the Norwegians at the Battle of Stamford Bridge. Hardrada was killed. The Viking Age was effectively over. Harold had no time to celebrate. 3 days later, William landed on the southern coast with 7,000 Norman soldiers. On the 14th of October, 1066, the 2 forces met near Hastings. The battle lasted all day. Harold was killed. When he fell, English resistance collapsed. William was crowned on Christmas Day 1066 in Westminster Abbey. The consequences were profound and permanent. The entire English aristocracy was replaced by Normans. French became the language of the court for the next 300 years. Old English merged with Norman French to create the foundation of modern English. William commissioned the Domesday Book in 1086, the most ambitious administrative survey in medieval Europe. The Tower of London, Canterbury Cathedral, castle after castle. The Normans built obsessively across the landscape. In 1215, King John, incompetent, cruel and financially desperate, was forced by rebelling barons to seal the Magna Carta at Runnymede. For the first time in English history, the king was subject to the law. No free man could be imprisoned without trial. These principles became the foundation of constitutional government and ultimately the United States Constitution. In 1337, the 100 Years' War against France began. English longbowmen became the most feared soldiers in Europe. At Agincourt in 1415, Henry V destroyed a French force 5 times the size of his own. But before glory came catastrophe. In 1348, the Black Death arrived. Within 2 years, it killed between 1/3 and 1/2 of England's entire population. The social order shattered. Feudalism began its slow collapse. By the mid-15th century, England was exhausted and politically unstable. 2 branches of the royal family went to war for the crown, the House of Lancaster with a red rose, the House of York with a white. 30 years of intermittent civil war, kings crowned and deposed, betrayals that defined English politics for generations. It ended at the Battle of Bosworth Field in 1485, where Richard III, the last English king to die in battle, was killed. The victor, Henry Tudor, established the most famous royal dynasty in English history. His son was anything but quiet. Henry VIII became king in 1509 at 17, Intellectually gifted, catastrophically egotistical, his obsession with producing a male heir led to the most consequential religious decision in English history. When Rome refused to annul his marriage to Catherine of Aragon, Henry broke with the Catholic Church entirely. He declared himself supreme head of the Church of England, dissolved the monasteries, and executed those who refused to comply, including his own Lord Chancellor Thomas More. He had 6 wives. 2 were executed. His children continued the revolution. Edward VI pushed radical Protestantism. Mary I burned nearly 300 Protestants at the stake. Then came Elizabeth I. Elizabeth's reign, 1558 to 1603, is remembered as England's golden age. She never married, governing through political genius and personal charisma. Under her rule, England became a major naval power. Shakespeare wrote his greatest plays. English explorers mapped the globe. The defining moment came in 1588. Philip II of Spain launched the Spanish Armada, 130 ships, 30,000 men, to invade England and restore Catholicism. The English fleet scattered them with superior tactics and fireships. Bad weather destroyed the rest. Over half the Armada was lost. Elizabeth died in 1603, last of the Tudors. The crown passed to James VI of Scotland, uniting the 2 crowns for the first time. The central question of 17th century England was fundamental. Who rules, the king or Parliament? Charles I believed his authority came directly from God. Parliament disagreed. In 1642, civil war erupted between royalist cavaliers and parliamentary roundheads, led by Oliver Cromwell. By 1645, Cromwell's new model army, England's first professional standing army, had crushed the royalists. Charles was tried for treason and on January 30th, 1649, beheaded outside the banqueting house in Whitehall. The execution of a king by his own parliament sent shockwaves across Europe. England became a protectorate under Cromwell's rule. He banned Christmas, closed theatres, and imposed strict Puritan morality, while also ordering massacres in Ireland remembered with bitterness to this day. When Cromwell died in 1658, the experiment collapsed. In 1660, Charles II was invited back from exile. The Restoration began, but the constitutional question was unresolved. When the openly Catholic James II took the throne, Parliament acted. It invited the Dutch Protestant William of Orange, married to James's own daughter, to invade. James fled without firing a shot. The Glorious Revolution of 1688 was complete. In 1689, William and Mary signed the Bill of Rights, establishing parliamentary supremacy, freedom of speech in Parliament, and constitutional monarchy. It has never been undone. By the early 18th century, Britain, united with Scotland by the Act of Union in 1707, was positioned for something unprecedented: stable constitutional government, the most sophisticated financial system in the world, a powerful navy, and the spark of the most transformative economic revolution since the invention of agriculture. The Industrial Revolution ignited in Britain in the 1760s, and here specifically for clear reasons: coal, iron, navigable rivers, a patent system protecting inventors, a culture that valued practical innovation. James Watt's steam engine, patented in 1769, became the symbol of the age. By 1850, Britain produced more than half the world's iron and coal. Cities transformed within a single generation. Simultaneously, the empire expanded. At its peak, the British Empire covered 24% of the Earth's land surface and governed 412 million people, roughly 23% of the world's population. India was the jewel in the crown. Canada, Australia, New Zealand, vast territories across Africa and Asia, all flew the Union Jack. The transatlantic slave trade was central to Britain's early imperial wealth. British merchants transported approximately 3.1 million enslaved Africans across the Atlantic. Britain abolished the slave trade in 1807, and slavery throughout the empire in 1833, but the wealth generated had already been deeply embedded in British institutions and capital. Queen Victoria, reigning from 1837 to 1901, became the symbol of the imperial age, Empress of India, grandmother to half the royal families of Europe, ruler of an empire on which the sun never set. But beneath the grandeur, tensions were building. Colonial resistance was growing. Germany was industrializing and rearming. The web of European alliances, designed to guarantee stability, was in reality a tripwire. In June 1914, in Sarajevo, an assassin's bullet killed Archduke Franz Ferdinand, and the world Britain had dominated for a century was about to be destroyed. August 1914, Britain declared war on Germany. What followed was unlike anything in human experience. The First World War, the Great War, killed approximately 700,000 British soldiers on the Western Front alone. The Battle of the Somme, launched on the 1st of July 1916, saw 57,470 British casualties in a single day, the bloodiest day in the history of the British Army. Officers led their men out of the trenches into machine gun fire. Entire generations of young men from the same towns, the same streets, the same families were wiped out together. When it ended in November 1918, Britain had won. But the victory was hollow. The empire was financially exhausted. The old social order, the deference, the class rigidity, the unquestioned authority, had been shattered in the mud of Flanders. The 1920s and 30s brought economic depression, mass unemployment, and a political crisis across Europe that Britain watched with growing dread. In September 1939, Germany invaded Poland. Britain and France declared war. The Second World War had begun. The early months were catastrophic. France fell in 6 weeks. The British Expeditionary Force was trapped at Dunkirk, and in a desperate 9-day naval operation in May-June 1940, over 338,000 Allied soldiers were evacuated from the beaches by a fleet of military vessels and hundreds of civilian boats, fishing boats, pleasure cruisers, river ferries. Britain now stood alone. Winston Churchill became Prime Minister in May 1940. His speeches, delivered at the darkest moment in British history, became some of the most powerful rhetoric in the English language. We shall fight on the beaches, we shall fight on the landing grounds, we shall fight in the fields and in the streets, we shall never surrender. In the summer and autumn of 1940, the Battle of Britain was fought entirely in the skies. The German Luftwaffe attempted to destroy the Royal Air Force as a precursor to invasion. For 3 months, outnumbered RAF pilots, many of them barely out of school, fought daily combat missions. By September, Hitler postponed the invasion indefinitely. Britain had held. The Blitz, the sustained German bombing of British cities, killed over 43,000 civilians. London burned for 57 consecutive nights. Britain fought on every front: North Africa, the Atlantic, Southeast Asia, Italy, and ultimately Normandy, where on June 6, 1944, the largest seaborne invasion in history began. D-Day. The liberation of Western Europe had started. Germany surrendered on May 8, 1945. Japan surrendered in September. The war was over. Britain had survived. But the cost had been catastrophic. Financially, demographically, psychologically. The country was effectively bankrupt. It had borrowed enormously from the United States. The empire, already weakening before the war, was now fatally undermined. India gained independence in 1947. Palestine, Burma, Ceylon followed. Through the 1950s and 60s, country after country across Africa and Asia raised their own flags. The Suez Crisis of 1956, when Britain attempted to retake the Suez Canal by force and was forced to back down by American pressure, made the new reality brutally clear. Britain was no longer a superpower. The age of empire was over, but a new Britain was being born. From the late 1940s, workers from the Caribbean, South Asia and Africa began arriving in Britain, invited to fill critical labour shortages in the NHS, transport and industry. The Empire Windrush docked at Tilbury in June 1948, carrying 492 passengers from Jamaica. It became the symbol of a demographic transformation that would permanently reshape British society, culture, food, music and identity. The 1970s were a decade of crisis for Britain. Inflation, 3-day working weeks, power cuts. The miners' strikes brought the government to its knees. Britain was described, not unfairly, as the sick man of Europe. In 1976, the government was forced to request an emergency loan from the International Monetary Fund. For a country that had once bankrolled the world, it was a humiliation. Then came Margaret Thatcher, elected in 1979, the first female Prime Minister in British history. Thatcher was a conviction politician of extraordinary force. She broke the power of the trade unions. She privatised nationalised industries. She deregulated the financial sector, transforming London into the global financial capital it remains today. She sent a naval task force 8,000 miles to retake the Falkland Islands from Argentina in 1982. Her supporters credit her with saving the British economy. Her critics argue she destroyed communities, particularly in the industrial north and in Wales, from which they have never recovered. Both are largely correct. The 1990s brought a cultural renaissance. Cool Britannia, Oasis, Blur, the Spice Girls, Damien Hirst, a resurgent London fashion scene. Tony Blair's Labour government, elected in a landslide in 1997, represented a genuine generational shift. The same year, Hong Kong, Britain's last major colony, was handed back to China. The imperial chapter was finally formally closed. The Good Friday Agreement of 1998 ended 3 decades of violent conflict in Northern Ireland, one of the most successful pieces of diplomatic peacemaking in modern British history. Then came September 11, 2001, and with it, Britain's commitment to the War on Terror. The invasion of Iraq in 2003, alongside the United States, remains the most controversial foreign policy decision in modern British history. The 7th of July 2005, the London bombings, brought the consequences of global terrorism directly to Britain's streets. 52 people killed in coordinated suicide attacks on the London transport network. The 2008 financial crisis hit Britain hard. A decade of austerity followed. And then, the question that had always simmered beneath the surface of British politics finally boiled over: Europe. On the 23rd of June, 2016, Britain held a referendum on its membership of the European Union. The result shocked the world. 51.9% voted to leave. Brexit, a word that entered every language on earth, was the most divisive political event in modern British history. It split families, cities, generations. It triggered years of constitutional crisis, 3 prime ministers in short succession, and a fundamental renegotiation of Britain's place in the world. On the 31st of January 2020, Britain formally left the European Union. Nearly 2,000 years after the Romans built their first road across this island, England was once again making its own rules. From footprints on a prehistoric beach to nuclear submarines beneath the North Atlantic, from Stonehenge to the steam engine, from Boudicca to Churchill, from Magna Carta to the Bill of Rights, from a small, rain-soaked island on the edge of Europe, to an empire that covered a quarter of the earth, England's history is not a clean story. It is a story of genius and cruelty, of courage and hypocrisy, of extraordinary invention and catastrophic arrogance. It is a story that shaped the language you're hearing right now, the legal systems that govern your country, the political ideas that define the modern world, and it is not finished. Whatever comes next, the debates about identity, about empire, about Europe, about what it means to be English in the 21st century, this island will keep arguing, keep reinventing, keep surprising the world. That is, after all, what it has always done. If this video gave you something, a fact you didn't know, a moment that made you think, hit that like button and share it with someone who loves history. Subscribe to Axis Narrative, because we're just getting started. We'll see you there.